to be a doctor, for example. There's Jewish jokes. They're good Jewish jokes, but they're funny anyway. Where the mother doesn't really think of her son as fully grown until he gets his medical degree. Ha ha. Well, I don't know if you've been keeping track of the statistics, but doctors are not really some of the wealthiest people anymore. It does cost an awful lot for you to get your medical degree, and as a result, you have a big debt to pay once you finish. Plus, it turns out that making money as a doctor isn't as easy as it seems. There's a lot of pressure on the costs of medicine and so on. Pharmaceuticals are very expensive. Machines are very expensive. Help is very expensive. The doctors, if they set up their own office, they have to pay for all of that, as well as constantly paying for their tuition, their student loans and so on. So when you look at the statistics, being a doctor, with one exception, isn't a way to make that kind of income that keeps you in the middle class or even upper middle class. The exception is dentists. And in fact, specifically a particular type of dentist, the ones that do the most expensive type of oral surgery. Which, by the way, has a high suicide rate. Which is, I asked my dentist once, why is it that dentists have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession? And he said, if you spent your day looking in the filthy mouths of your customers, you would understand. Oops, sore spot. Don't say things like that while your mouth is open and he's poking around with a metal object. That does indicate, though, that I'm rather dumb when I do stuff like that. So what kind of field would give you the kind of opportunity to make a lot of money? Code writing. As I understand it, right now the people that, as a profession, make the most money, and this is apart from superstars in like movies, or superstars like Taylor Swift, or superstars like football players. But on the other hand, when you look at those superstars and how much money they make, and you look at how many people are trying to make it in that profession, what you discover is statistically your chances are not very good to be that individual. So if you want to look at a profession where you can make a lot of money, as long as you make the requirements to be in that profession, then the one that makes the most money tends to be the people who are writing the software to take advantage of the technologies that we currently are using. Because it's a skill, you have to have the education, you have to learn the logical languages associated with doing these, but at the same time, it's a very competitive field. And so what happens is the software companies, or the people that start them, remember Elon Musk, who's considered one of the richest people in the world, depending on what moment you're asking, right? Got his start exactly that way. He was the one that wrote the code that you could use when you're on Google Earth and you can zoom down or zoom up to a location. So they had a particular map program that they started. They had roughly a couple $1 million to build this company. Most of the money cost the rental of the space where they spent developing it. But once they developed this MapQuest thing or whatever it was, they sold it for a lot more money, and then they used that money to invest into other things. And as you know, he eventually invested in a car company, Tesla, SpaceX, etc. So some of his purchases seem pretty dumb in retrospect, buying Twitter and changing it to X. I mean, but nonetheless, notice he got his start in exactly this field where Murray basically recommends you spend your focus academically in order to, if you don't want to follow your passion, which is a whole other thing, but you want to make a lot of money, follow this route. And so statistically, you're looking at who's making the money. And by the way, that's a current projection based on a past gathering of information. And we're already on the cusp of seeing that endangered, because who's writing the software now? Artificial intelligence. And that's one of the things that's scary. It's one of the reasons that the writers went on strike to try to prevent artificial intelligence from creeping in on their job, or the longshoremen who, their jobs are dependent on their physically being there and driving the equipment and moving all of the big shipments, which were starting to be replaced by AI. So there's all these different jobs right now, including code writing, that are being replaced or can be expected to be replaced by AI, which means, really a big question we're going to have in the future, and Charles Murray writes about this as well, is we're going to have a future without work. People will be too expensive to hire to do things. Instead, everybody will be out of work, and then you have the question of, well, but they're the customers. They have to have the money to buy things, otherwise all these industries will go bankrupt. So people have to have money somehow. So how do we manage this? Well, Murray, in one of his books, argues that we should have a universal income. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but basically, if you're alive and human, even if as a child, you should get a certain amount of money each year. And if you're in a family, of course, then what happens is your parents can take that money. Actually, it kind of sort of works that way here in Alaska, because we have the PFD. If you live in Alaska?
I just moved here.
You just moved here, so you don't have the PFD yet. We moved here in 1987. Takes a year for you to establish residency, but once you do that, you apply for the PFD, and you can continue to get it. Just so you get an idea, at one point, as my wife and I had 4 children, plus Grandpa moved in with us, so there were 7 of us in the house. And the one year the PFD was $1,800 per person. And we took that and we put it on the house. By the way, we paid off the house rather quickly, as you can imagine, doing that. You get the idea, This is kind of like universal income, at least in Alaska. And it does have a significant impact on the poverty rates in Alaska. Because just that much money, I think the highest it ever was the one year Sarah Palin was governor, and she arranged for not only everybody to get a PFD check, but also a check for energy, so that between the two of them, you ended up with a check of approximately $3,000 per person from the state of Alaska. And also notice that Alaska doesn't charge income tax. I grew up in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a state income tax. And if you lived and worked in Philadelphia, you didn't even have to live there. You just had to work there. Either way, you paid 5% tax on your income to the city of Philadelphia. So you had a city tax, a state tax, and a U.S. national tax, right? Living here in Alaska, we have a real estate tax. So if you own property, you end up paying a certain amount of money each year, which is argued over each year, depending on what the needs are for the community and what the mill rate. The mill rate is per thousand. How much tax do we charge for whatever? In short, Alaska, it's another reason to think of Alaska and here as the best of all possible places to live today, is because you're not paying these other taxes. Massachusetts is often jokingly referred to as Taxachusetts. But California is also a very expensive place because of the taxes. They're not quite built on the model of like the Northern European socialist systems, which are, of course, they have all these wonderful benefits. Everybody gets special child care. They get free education to PhD. They don't have to worry about their medical costs. Everything is free, etc. But guess what? If you look at your income, half of it goes to taxes. So basically, it's a very different type of system. So we can look there and say, oh my goodness, look how they do it there. Everybody's so much happier and so on. Yeah, but number one, they only have Norwegians in Norway. Not very many other people, actually. And they all look alike almost, actually. Kind of, sort of. I know some Norwegians, and they could probably yell at me for that. But hey, if you're sitting in a sauna with a bunch of other Norwegians, you really need a name tag, to know which one you are. Sorry, that's probably not as funny as I thought it was. However, so even today, predicting that the best kind of job you could get into would be taking lots of logic. I didn't mean this to be kind of a self-promotion for logic, but you could take a lot of math courses, learn a lot of computer writing skills, and expect to get a job probably before you graduate. I mean, because people are looking desperately for people to write those kinds of software programs. I've had students who weren't even graduates of high school yet, who were taking the middle college courses, left before, maybe they finished high school, but meanwhile they had already left for Canada, where they had established their own software company and were actively working on becoming a millionaire already. So that happens. I've seen it, right in, UAA. What else? So those are examples of arguments based on statistics. Where, by the way, the book, The Bell Curve, has a big section in the beginning that's all about IQ testing and what it is and how it got started, a history of it. The best piece on IQ that I've read. A lot of people don't believe IQ is testable. They also point out that IQ tests are biased, so that if you're looking for a particular set of skills and you set up the test for that, you're testing for those skills. The people that have had preparation in their lifetime so far for those skills are the ones that are most likely to end up succeeding in the test. Well, duh, if the people that are giving you the test are giving it to you because they're looking for people who are good at those skills, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They don't want to hire the people that don't have the preparation for that. The broadest based test, by the way, and I also had the pleasure of taking that test, was the kind of test that the Army uses, design. In fact, the Army has been one of the ones most interested in the IQ testing from way back in World War I, because they needed